Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Progressing Technology Enhanced Teaching course webinar. My name is Nair Carrera, and I'm one of the moderators of this course, along with other moderators such as Katia or Diane Laurillard, who are here with us today to discuss with you about the TEDSAT tool. So you're working on module 3 now, which is the last module of the course, and this is about peer reviewing or self-assessing your competencies to develop TEDSAT. That for those who are watching us and maybe are not familiar with this, this is an online tool developed by the MENTEP project, thanks to the help of more than 7,000 teachers in 10 different countries, and the tool is based off four modules, so digital pedagogy, digital use and production, digital citizenship, and digital communication and collaboration. So since we have the chance to have Diane here with us today, we thought that it could be useful to give you the opportunity to discuss with her about the TEDSAT tool or anything related to the course. So you're supposed to be able to talk. Your microphones are enabled. So in case you have any question or you want to discuss anything, just unmute your microphone and you will be able to talk. So the webinar will focus on two topics. On the one hand, the process of self-assessment, and on the other hand, on the value of teachers sharing their teaching ideas. And just before we start, to give you a little bit of a background of Diana. So Diana is Chair of Learning with Digital Technologies at the London Knowledge Lab, Institute of Education in the University College in London. She's involved in running two MOOCs, both on learning technology, and she's also working as an expert on the MENTEP project, of which this course is it's a part, and she advises on technology-enhanced teaching and peer assessment issues. She also led the team who designed the Learning Designer tool, a very nice tool that for those who...
La bustina che sta fuori di lievito è scaduta come quella che ho usato io, forse perciò.
Okay, so we have some background noise. Okay, and just to finish, Diane, if you are ready, I think we can give you the microphone now. And for the others, please, if you're not able to talk.
Ho cioccolato la bevida, ma siamo a posto.
Okay, siamo a posto. We are hearing somebody speaking. For the moment, if you're not speaking, please mute your microphone so that we don't hear you, okay? Because we can hear everything. So if you're not gonna talk, please mute your microphone. And yes, we are hearing. Okay. Okay, Diana, if you're ready, thank you very much for being here with us. It's a pleasure to have you. And whenever you're ready, the floor is yours.
Thank you, and welcome to everybody. It's lovely to have you there on chat, but we'd love to hear from you speaking as well. And as I said before, please don't worry about the English. I'm sure we can communicate very well, and everyone's English looks great on the chat. And I want to, again, thank you for listening to me in English. I think the place to start is if I just go through some of the points which I thought we might discuss on the webinar today. First of all, if you have any specific questions or topics that you would like to discuss during the webinar, maybe comments or things which have been confusing on what you've done so far on the course, or issues that you want to raise. And of course you can do that on the chat as well. So I try to remember to look at chat, and I'm sure that both Nair and Katia will remind me if there's anything which I'm missing there. So first of all, when I've been through this, I will ask if anybody has any questions or topics for us to look at. Then it would be nice to hear about your own reflections on what it's been like to work with the TEDSAT tool. We've had a number of discussions in the course so far, and I must say I'm very impressed at how positive your reactions have been. Now, I don't know if that's because everybody is very polite or because you're naturally positive people. I think teachers always are. But let's hear also if you have any areas where you're not so sure and you'd like to ask some questions about it. That would be fine too. And what about this process of self-assessment? One of the nice things is that many people have said this is a very good way because it makes you think, it makes you reflect on what you're doing in your teaching. So that's very good to hear. Does that actually carry through into doing something different in your teaching? That would be interesting to hear about. And then there's the issue of the value of teachers sharing their teaching ideas. And this, of course, is an opportunity on a MOOC like this to hear from everybody. And you've been very good in the sharing of your competence evidence and filling in the template. People have shared ideas, we've shared links, and then the discussion forums, there's people saying, yes, I agree, and I think that's a great idea, and that's really good. So this would be an opportunity for us to think about how we can use MOOCs like this to bring together that teaching community in thinking about how we can build that knowledge together, because we're all experimenting with digital tools all the time. So it's a good idea to think about that. And that's why this final question, which I think is behind a lot of what we're trying to do with this whole MOOC and with the TETSAT tool itself, can we, do you think, begin to build a community of practice in technology-enhanced teaching across teachers in Europe generally? Could we bring people together to do this? And could the TETSAT tool be a means by which we do this? So that's the shape of what I see our discussion as being if we work through this, and I will refer to some of the things in the course. But first, I'd like to hear, does anybody have any specific questions or ideas they want to share, or comments they want to share? So I'll just pause for about a minute just to give you time to come in while I read what's going on in the chat. Let me encourage you again to press that microphone button, come in and ask something.
I believe, sorry to interrupt, I believe Carla wants to talk because she raised her hand. So Carla, please go ahead.
Well, I have worked a bit with the DigComp European framework. And I was reflecting upon the fact that this tool, the TETSAT tool, which is really good, I think it helped me a lot to reflect upon what I do or did. And how can I compare the two tools, which are probably in our future? I mean, we will have to use them both.
Which was the other tool you referred to, Carla?
The European Digital Competencies Framework.
Yes.
Has been discussed a lot.
Well, there have been a number of frameworks around over the years, and they do change, because the kinds of things which people are doing with digital tools necessarily changes because the tools keep changing. So one of the things that we've thought about in the TETSAT MENTEP project is how to keep the tools up to date. Now, I don't know about the European digital framework. I think there's a lot that's in common with what's in the TETSAT tool in terms of broad sweep of competences we all have to develop. But within TETSAT, we've also thought about how we keep that up to date, so that as you, as teachers, are working with new tools as they come along, or you're being inventive about the way that you use the existing tools, so over time, you will be requiring that these frameworks develop and respond to what you're doing. So by having this kind of community develop around the tool itself, it's possible that we might be able to enable that process of maturation of the tool itself to continue over time. So I don't know if that makes sense, but I think as you work with the TETSAT tool, you will find that you are able to relate that very well to what's in the European Digital Framework tool. But I'm also going to ask Katja and Nair if they want to respond to that question as well. So
from my side, thank you for the question. From my side, I haven't tried that tool, the other one, so I don't know if Katja maybe has an answer about this.
No, I don't think Katja's coming in.
Katja, can you hear us?
Sorry, I muted my microphone. I was trying to speak and wondering why.
It's okay, thanks.
So my point, Diana explained it very well, but the point is that DigCom framework is a framework, and as our tool is a tool so already developed based on different frameworks. One of them being the MENTEP framework, and what's interesting about the TETSAT tool is that it's already operational. But it's indeed a good question how all the different frameworks that are around and the different tools will work together, and that's something that is an ongoing discussion. So thank you for the question.
Mm-hmm. Can I ask?
Yes, who's that?
Okay, yeah. I think that the added value of a tool like the TETSAT will be probably the community of teachers that sustain it, which the other frameworks, I think, they don't have that.
No, so I think you're absolutely right, yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's the precious thing I'm looking forward to contribute to.
That's very good to hear, Carla, because I think the contributions from teachers are so important in this. And certainly previous frameworks, there's been the UNESCO framework as well, and there's one from America, the ITSE group developed a framework, and we've had them in the UK as well. We've just been running a MOOC about digital skills generally, for example, and before we ran that course, we reviewed a number of frameworks for digital skills, and it's very difficult because different frameworks develop for different reasons and in different contexts, and you can see a lot of commonality between them, but there's often slightly different words used. They mean the same thing, but they're slightly different. And I think in the development of TETSAT, there was one of the great things about it is that it's worked across so many European countries, and it did take account of pre-existing frameworks, so that it's a good place to start now when we're thinking about it. You won't go badly wrong by working to this, and as you say, having this process of having a community develop around it, then the community knows what it's doing. It's not just the kind of static framework that defines everything once and then never changes, and we all have to continue working to that no matter what happens. So I think it's going to work very well to take us beyond those rather static frameworks that don't change. So let's see what's in the chat now. Emilia has been saying, I have to deepen the information in the course. I feel that it's necessary for me. I'm not a beginner in ITC use, and I want to understand very well everything that happens at the course. Well, I'm sure you do understand that you're not a beginner. You're developing like everyone else. And I mean, all of us, even when we've been working in this field for a very long time, are constantly aware that we've got so much to learn. That's why I value teaching, because I learn so much from my students. about new tools. I've learned things just in teaching this, working on this MOOC, is that you are suggesting things I've never heard of. So it's so important that we learn from each other. This community is vital. So any other points that people want to raise, or topics of interest, questions that have occurred to you as you work through? Lorenzo says, are you thinking of including the ways to improve your competence in the tool? Well, that's an interesting question, because at the moment we don't say this is how you improve your competence, but what we have been doing is collecting your ideas for how to do that. Although I noticed it was quite interesting, in one of the forums we were saying, so now you know what level you are, for at least some of the competences, what do you feel you need to move to the next level? And a lot of the discussion in that forum was about how you would help your students to move to the next level, which wasn't quite what we were asking. We were really saying, what do you need now to help you move on? Some people did answer the question, and there were suggestions like you talk to a colleague who is further ahead than you, but then a lot of the people coming into this course will already be ahead of their own colleagues, so you don't always have someone else to go to. On the other hand, people who are still beginners themselves are still exploring, and so they may find resources or tools or websites which you don't know about, so you can always learn from a colleague in that way. So certainly I think going to other colleagues is one of the best ways we can learn. And then exploring what you can do with the tools that you've already got. Because one of the burdens of this, working in this area, is there's so much to learn. There's always a new tool coming along. You've got to learn that. You've got to figure out how to work with it. But actually, if you explore a bit more around the tools you're already using, if you're using a VLE, a virtual learning environment, like Moodle, for example, is the one that I use and I know best, there are so many things you can do. And you begin to get the particular things you like and you know, but there are a number of other things in there as well that you could be using and exploring. So just trying out one new thing can be a way in which you take yourself beyond. And then if you look at some of the descriptions of different levels in the TETSAT tool, very often you'll find things like the higher levels are about adapting something to your students, or reflecting on something which enables you to make it better for your students, or extending what you do to include more students, to be more inclusive. So you'll see in the way that the tool invites you to reflect that there are ways in which you can improve without necessarily going on a course, without necessarily learning a new tool, but just operating like a true professional, to reflect, adapt, explore, test, to go beyond what you're currently doing. So I think that those, we need to share ideas, and it's very good to have your ideas coming in. But now I'm just going to refer back to the goodness. There's been a lot of things coming in on here since I last looked at it. That's great. Thank you for your comments. So people are saying it's quite difficult.
Diana, if you don't mind, I'll just read one of the questions from the chat for you.
Thank you. Yes, I'm finding it difficult to get to them. Yeah. So go ahead, Katja.
So, Christina is asking, my problem is how can I improve my students' ICT competences if the schools are not prepared for it, meaning there's no computers or anything?
Well, yes, that is extremely difficult. If there are no computers, not being prepared for it can mean many things. If there are no computers in the school, you may still find that there are computers outside the school. Sometimes they have their own. it's remarkable to me how much smartphones have penetrated and are available to so many people now. Even people in quite difficult environments might have access to smartphones. And there's a lot you can do with a smartphone to learn about digital competences of different kinds. Just to learn about how to search websites, to find information, to find out whether that's a reliable website. So some of those competencies which are noted in the tool about how you help your students with that, it's important when they're using their own digital tools and devices, which so many of them have. So just making use of what they have themselves at home or in their leisure enables you to make them see what they're doing more clearly, to work with, being careful about how they work online, to be sure to understand whether this is a good authoritative website or whether it's just rubbish or fake news or whatever. So there are those kinds of things you can do with what they have access to already. Then you will sometimes find that in some communities there are places like internet cafes, or there are schools which open up to other communities, to other people in their school. There could be opportunities like that. It depends on where you are. And then the next thing to do is to make your school prepare for it. So some of the things we're looking at here is about how you pass on to your colleagues what we should all be doing. So if nothing else, you could invite your colleagues to join you on this course so that it's not just you in the school. Maybe there's 5 or 6 of you in the school who are now aware of what you could be doing and what other people are doing and how your school might be falling behind, and therefore your students will not be able to compete with other students. And that's a case which you can then make to the people who are in the management, the senior management in your school. Persuade them to come and see this, just to look at it. Run something like a lunchtime session where you have a workshop where you take people through some of the examples that you see in this course and in some of the other EU SchoolNet courses, which are all about using digital in education, teaching and learning. So just to invite your colleagues to be more aware of how important this is, how other places are doing it, that's a way in which you might persuade them to do more about upgrading the school. Maybe you have to go to, I don't know if all your schools have school governors. If you have parents, other parents in the school might be interested in joining you in a campaign. I mean, really talking about a campaign now, if it's that bad. So is that feasible? Would that make sense? Could you do that in your school? Could you be one of the people who persuades the school to change, to modernize?
Christina says thank you in the chat and that she will try. And I have a bit of a follow-up question, I believe, from Monica, who's asking how to put into practice TETSAT tools if the curriculum is so busy. It was kind of going the same direction, you know, how to deal with the
what we hope, of course, the point of bringing digital tools into the classroom is that students learn better with them and therefore achieve more in the curriculum. So it should not be instead of any curriculum points. This is not, we're not asking people to learn about digital tools, we're asking people to learn how to use digital tools to learn with. So if you're teaching something like a science curriculum, for example, there's a lot of topics to cover in a science curriculum. Well, suppose you're coming to a new topic in science. Let's talk about climate change, because everybody knows about climate change and it's a familiar topic. If you're going to teach something like that, why not set as the first thing you do an exploration for your students to go and find out something about climate in a place they know, in a country they know, or in a city. It could be in another country. Excuse me. Find out something, maybe some current information, a report about climate change, and bring that to the next class. Well, by doing that, you will have already engaged your students in thinking about this, and also in knowing something that nobody else in the class knows, so they're excited to tell people about it. Something like that is a very good way of using digital resources to enhance the way in which those students engage with that topic in the curriculum. So it should never be either or. It should never be a fight with the curriculum. It should always be assisting the curriculum. So let's see.
Maybe I'll just point out what Carla says, because several people agreed. She says in Italy we have a digital facilitator per school, which I am too, but persuading the ones who make decisions is hard. And some of my colleagues, well, I started to propose a bring your own device policy, but many teachers see smartphones as pure evil.
Many teachers see
smartphones as pure evil, as a bad thing.
Well, now that's precisely why we need a community of teachers engaged in this, because I recognize that, you know, there is a kind of resistance among some people. They think it's a terrible thing. It's distracting students from what they should be doing in the classroom. And then you find other teachers who've embraced that, who think, okay, this is an opportunity. The students are interested in using this kind of tool. Why are they so interested in it? It's because they can engage with each other in very active ways. They can explore things, they can go online, they can play games. Well, all of those activities could be ways in which we engage students in thinking about a scientific topic or a curriculum topic. So rather than banning them and saying they are pure evil, let's think about why they're so exciting. It's because they empower students, and so students enjoy using them. Well, are there ways in which we could use the smartphone, bring it into the classroom, and specifically use it to change the way in which we do just one thing in a term? So that's where you find that this kind of community of teachers can exchange those ideas, because people have tried that. So if you're finding it difficult to engage people because they are so anti-technology, then again, I would say bring them into some of the sessions in this MOOC. In lots of the other EU SchoolNet MOOCs, you will find the same kind of enthusiasm among teachers for what they can do with digital. And teachers are more persuaded by other teachers than by anybody else telling them. So that would be one way to try it, I would say.
I have, thank you, Diana. I have one more question, which is a more, bringing us back to the TEDSAT itself. And then, in the meantime, do continue to ask more questions. So Marina was wondering, she knows a lot about ICT, but cannot use them because of country curriculum restrictions. And then she's not sure how to fill in the TEDSAT questions, because the TEDSAT asks always for the option I am experienced in doing that.
Yes, if you have no opportunity to try things out with your students, then it is restricted. But I don't quite understand why a country's curriculum should stop you trying things out. Is it really the curriculum that's stopping you using digital tools? Is that Maria saying that?
I'm not sure if Marina already answered, but there's still a lot of people saying that, you know, there's problems with smartphones being forbidden at their schools.
Yes.
Not enough internet.
There was also a comment from Maria Cristina saying that in their school smartphones are banned, so they cannot be used.
Yes.
And again, who's brave enough to speak with us using
Yes.
the microphone? We already had one person that going as the first one, so it's perfectly fine to put it in the chat, but you're more than welcome also to use the microphones.
Yes, there's Patrizia is saying, my pupils in the primary school are not used to being able to use tools alone at home to do homework. Yes, of course, that is true. If they don't have access at home, it's not a familiar tool, so they can't do it at home. But that's the kind of thing then you have to bring into the classroom to enable them to get familiar with these kinds of tools. We can't necessarily do it the other way around. Sometimes the home is ahead of the school, and then if you're an enthusiastic teacher, you can make use of that, as I was saying earlier. But very often the home has no technology at all. And when that happens, then the school is the only opportunity really that that child has to become familiar with what they really need for the modern world. So technology in the school becomes very important. It's their only lifeline, which is why I think teachers campaigning within their school can be so important. Because if the school isn't doing it already, then they are going to make life very difficult for their students when they leave school. Because everywhere needs people who understand technology.
Do you have any particular questions in the chat? Because I see the discussion going on, but do you have specific questions for Diana? Because now it's a unique opportunity to ask questions live about the TEDSAT, the course, everything you were ever wondering, or also the use of digital tools in your school and teaching.
Yes, Carlo is saying we have a digital facilitator in every school, but persuading the ones who make decisions is hard. It's still true. You're absolutely right. I mean, I've been in this field for many years now, and I thought, 20 years ago it would all be different. We'd have a new set of leaders running education departments and running education ministries and running schools and so on, and yet it's still the case. The people do not understand digital. So we have to not only understand what we do in our own practice and understand what the tools can do, but we have to become proselytizers. That's a very difficult English word. What is it? Disciple? I don't know. It's visionaries and campaigners, and there's no other way, because it's so important for our young people to have these skills. So we have to find a way of bringing this into the classroom. Even if the opportunity is not made for us, we have to try and make those opportunities ourselves. I know teachers in the UK where we have a strict sort of teaching quality assurance process. We have inspections and people come, they visit the school, and then they give a score that this school is satisfactory or outstanding. And every school needs to get that outstanding, but they don't get it if they're not very careful. So in some schools where they've been innovating with technology, they hide it when the inspector comes, because they're very worried that they may get a bad score. So it's so often the case that the way education is run actually suppresses innovation instead of enabling it. That's why this kind of tool and this kind of course is so important, because it brings us together. There's a kind of solidarity among people who know how important this is and who can push forward. It's so important for our young people.
There's a question in the chat from Maria. Can the TEDSAT tool help students to do a self-evaluation?
Well, I don't. It's a nice point, because of course students could do their own assessment, but it's really focused on how teachers support students. So I'm not sure that it would work all that well for students, but then there are other kinds of digital skills competence tests which students could use to do that. I'm not sure that I can think off the top of my head of what they would be, but you know, assessing your own digital competence in the general sense, there are tools that do that. So we could look to see, yes. That would
No,
be
I also have to say I really like the idea. It's not something the TEDSAT as it is now can do, but definitely a good idea because
Katja,
assessment is also interesting for students.
Katja, here's a way of thinking about that, which is that we have a scheme called Digital Leaders in schools. I don't know if this probably happens in other countries in Europe as well. So it's a recognition that the students often know more than the teachers do about digital tools. So in a primary school, for example, you would in each year identify 2 or 3 students who really enjoy computers, enjoy learning about them, are very good at using them, and you identify them as digital leaders. And they are the ones who help the teacher set things up, or they are the ones who help other students, or they are the ones who write a blog for their class or for their year about interesting digital resources or things you can do with smartphones or something like that, which are appropriate for education. So those students in primary or secondary school would be the kinds of students who could use the TEDSAT tool and identify how good they are being at being digital leaders. I'm not sure that all of the questions would be appropriate, but a lot of them would be. So we could think of it that way, perhaps, of asking the digitally competent students who are good at helping the teacher to run through the TEDSAT tool themselves and see how well it works. That would be quite interesting. It's a nice idea.
I would be also quite curious because maybe they say some of the items are not, or competences are less relevant to them than we think.
Yeah, I think that would be true. I'm sure it would be true, but we could have rework the tool maybe.
And then Anna Rita is saying that she would like to share her knowledge about TEDSAT, which she finds very efficient with her colleagues, because she thinks this would be a very useful tool.
Yes,
to use for others.
That would be good. I'm going to just move on to the next slide because this is just to look through what we've been doing in the different activities. And over the second module, it was a process of developing evidence of your different competencies, and everyone was submitting through using the competence evidence template, exhibiting examples and putting your examples into the forum. And in quite a few cases, I think people found it quite useful and interesting to see what other people had done. I certainly found a lot of them really interesting. And so it's possible for us to think through how we could formalize this process more as a way of exchanging and finding lots of different examples of how people have done things in a range of different curriculum areas and using a range of different tools. So it's nice to think about how we could extend this kind of operation. What do you think about the value of being able to not just develop your own competence, but share those ideas with other teachers? Do you have any comments on that sort of thing? Well, I just read through the chat again.
There is a question from Maria Cristina Lian. So she's asking, at what school age do you consider more appropriate to start with an online collaborative tool?
Well, almost any age that I think of suggesting, I can imagine people saying, oh, I've had a student younger than that who can do it. We tend to think of collaboration being something that adults do rather than students. Primary school students I've seen, we know that primary school students work very well together in the classroom. They can collaborate very well. So they can work together when they're helped by the teacher to do that. So if you're trying to use an online collaborative tool, then you've got to have some digital skills to be able to do that. And we all know children of quite young ages who are pretty good at using communication tools. You know, they're perfectly good at using chat or text or Twitter or social media of various kinds, so they can do that. Being able to collaborate online is more difficult because you've got to not only talk, but agree and negotiate and bring something together. And that's useful if you've got a good online collaborative tool that helps you go through that process. So the kind of thing that we've been going through in this course, for example, where we ask you to contribute something and then discuss that process in the forum, that's quite a sophisticated thing to ask a child at primary school to do. But if you designed it the right way and you had the kinds of tools that they were familiar with using for chat or something, you might be able to do it. So, I don't know, I'm kind of reluctant to put a lower age on it really, because I think you could always, if you design it carefully, you can go further and further, younger children can do it. But I've certainly seen in primary classrooms, seeing children age around 9 or 10 or 11 certainly being able to do this kind of thing. Yes, so I would certainly say that. But how low could it be? I'm not sure.
Lorenzo says really an interesting webinar, but has to leave because of work. So I take that as an opportunity to say it's been 45 minutes, so we still have time for questions. So if you still want to ask any questions, use your opportunity now, either in the chat or using the microphone. Diana, I don't know if you want to move ahead, or if anybody also has any reactions to your previous question, like what you think about the whole approach to share examples with others.
Please do respond to that. I like what Amelia said. I tell them they do not get away. They will use computers and the internet. That's good. And what Nuretin said, Tet's the most beautiful name I can give. That's great, isn't it? We should have some of these quotes for publicizing the tool. Can the TETSAT tool help students to do it? Yes, that was the one that we just discussed, wasn't it?
Yeah, and Miguel is just saying, I think the TETSAT tool makes full sense with the examples provides with the competence evidence examples provided by teachers. So what about associating them in any sense to make us teachers fully aware of each step and how to move on to the next one?
Well, I think that's something we could think about, isn't it, Katja, is in the further development of the tool, when we have, when you get to the end of it and you find that you've got a capable level at one point and a beginner level at another point, and then you want to know, so how do I move on? And as we begin to collect these examples, and ideas about how you move from one level to the next. And here's an example of being a capable level, and you're still at beginner level. So you look at that example, it gives you some ideas, you begin to put that into practice, and then you move up. So by being able to relate some of the ideas that people have been submitting already, and we begin to collect those sorts of resources, then we can do more than we have on the MENTEP site at the moment, because those are quite general kinds of examples. They're nice examples, but they're not specific to a particular level or competence. So as we begin through this process to collect these examples, those help teachers to move through. So I think that is something we could link to the tool in the longer term, if we can progress it beyond that. And Rita is saying, I'd like to speak about TETSAT that I didn't know and that I found really efficient. I think this is the tool we should share with all the teachers at the school who in some way all use internet. Well, that's exactly
that I
our
read
project.
to you earlier as well already.
Yeah, sorry, Katja?
Just to make sure you replied to this comment already earlier. So
okay.
maybe it's confusing if I read some of the comments and then you find them in chat. So I just. Is there any more comments from people? And meanwhile, yes, Miguel, I think it's a great idea and a way to indeed answering to the question, how can we make it more easier for people to imagine how they can progress from one level to the other. Using these concrete teaching examples could indeed be one way of doing that.
So that's my next slide that I'm showing just now, is that in one of these forums, the way we're thinking about actions to move to the next level, and this is just one fragment of one of these conversations, and showing that people are...
Diana just saying, Diana just saying, I see that Monica, the example you selected, she's with us on the webinar. So.
Yes, I know, yes. So that was a very nice example. And being able to share those sort of examples, and then other people come in and offer new ideas. And these are all illustrations for what that competence looks like. When we come to next week and we do the peer review, that's a way of validating what you've done, of having a kind of peer review quality assurance process, which allows us to say, well, people think this is good. So we could not really say, if we just collect teachers' examples, these are all good examples. We need to have some kind of peer review process going on. So we've begun to see we've begun to see that operating in the previous run of the MOOC, and it'll be interesting to see how it works next week when we move into the peer review process. So that's an example of how it could work. Yeah. Do we have any other comments coming in? Can we persuade someone to speak to us and give us their reflections on this? Let me just go back. This is the final slide now. Just thinking about how valuable you find it to see other people's examples. We've just been talking about that. And then the overall question that I put to you was, can we begin to build a community of practice in technology-enhanced teaching among teachers across Europe, and using the TETSAT tool as the means to do this? So could we have some reflections on that, just to end with? What's this nice Padlet from Carla? What is that, Carla? Can you explain it to us? Memorable events.
I believe I'm just jumping in. I don't know if Carlos, if you're there, just speak up, okay? Otherwise, I just had a look, and I think it's a Padlet that she used with their students, where they share some memorable events. But Carla, feel free to go ahead, please.
Yes, it was just a suggestion. I had this experience with students who didn't know how to use Padlet. It took no more than 2 hours for them to complete that. So primary school students can enjoy a lot an application like that. And there are tools that can really help us at every level of ICT knowledge, I think. It was something, I didn't correct the grammar there. I just left it as it was because it showed how enthusiastic they were. I corrected it by copying and pasting and sending them messages. I think that the tool is really precious, and the community will be even more precious to exchange ideas at any level.
That's a very nice way to put it. It's a great opportunity, and what you demonstrate with the Padlet is exactly that, how young students can be and get a lot of excitement out of sharing those ideas together. It's a lovely way to do it. And they're very happy to use these digital tools. They're not mysterious for younger people. They're very good at doing it. Grazia was asking, has TETSAT tool been used already? Well, Katya and Nara are in a good position to report on the extent to which it's been tested with teachers. Would you like to say something about that? Did I lose you somehow? Katya? No?
Katya.
I'm just looking
Yes,
at
Katya.
Yeah?
Can you hear me now?
Yes,
Yes, we can. Yeah, great.
I briefly lost my internet connection, so I can say that you are here in the MOOC still among the first teachers across Europe to use the TETSAT. However, we did test the tool already with a selected number of teachers in the 11 MENTEP countries, and I think overall around 3,000 teachers already used the TETSAT as part of a more scientific research. And now, yeah, you're still among the first ones to use TETSAT, and we will have also results from the experiment or the research we did on the use of TETSAT, which you will also find in a while on our MENTEP website, mentep.eun.org.
I think.
Any other questions? Yeah.
Yes, I think I'm not sure that I would call this measuring digital competence, because it's essentially self-assessment, and that means that it's not formalized. I mean, would you say that's measuring self-assessment, Katya, or is it measuring digital competence, or is it analyzing digital competence or assessing digital competence rather than measuring?
Well, I would certainly also put the emphasis on self-assessing, so it's not so much measuring as in it being an objective measure. It's the emphasis really on the self-assessment and the reflection.
I think that
self-assessment, yeah, in nature is really something different from somebody else testing your skills.
But it has that very important component of reflection, which we see coming through in the forums all the time, is people saying how it makes you think about what you do and think about what more you might do, and it has that kind of value, where if it were, a test that you had to go through and pass or fail, for example, it wouldn't have that same kind of impact at all. But as a professional development tool, it does seem to be working very well. It's interesting.
And maybe just a very interesting aspect to share with you already from our research is that, for example, we see that women also look differently at self-assessment, also of the TETSAT, than men. So that's also, I thought, interesting, because it's a wider topic on how women self-assess their skills differently from those of men, and you can also see that with our TETSAT.
Yes, well, that's universal. I'm just going further down the chat where Nuretin is saying there is a technological tool that teaches learning, thus emotionally purified, real knowledge can be achieved. Which technological tool are you referring to, Nuretin, there? I'm trying to quite understand. French and English work with pupils. It's difficult to use all these tools. Yes, it's difficult to use all of them. And then Nuretin goes on to say, because future virtual teaching methods and artificial intelligence will be built by the designing individuals. Yes, well, we have to be very careful what they build, and there had better be some good teachers in there. One of the worrying things for me is that artificial intelligence proceeds by people who are interested in coding and algorithms and those kinds of things, who don't necessarily explore what happens with other kinds of human interactions. And there are many, many, many educational apps, educational games and so on, so-called, which are developed by people who are not teachers and who don't really understand what it takes to learn and what it takes to teach. So there are some very bad things which are made. So it's very, very important that teachers become skilled in how to advise and guide and design these kinds of new sorts of virtual teaching methods. So if AI is going to come into it, it had better be algorithms that teachers develop and understand, just techies. And that's a personal opinion, I suppose. The beginning is hard, yes. Well, I think that's true.
I think being conscious of time, we have really only a few minutes left. So
quickly through. I'm looking at Anna Rita's comment. I think it would be the right way to work. Building a community of practice is very important. I'm the digital facilitator of my school, and my colleagues often ask me to help them with digital tools, but I'd never thought about assessing our digital competences. That's a nice point, because I think if you were to invite your colleagues to engage with the tool, that would bring a kind of community group together to think about, so now what do we do? How do we explore and use these other things? And Yuretin is saying, I believe that if you want to prepare people for the future, if you want to shape the future, we have to make all our investments in human beings. The principles will continue to exist in the extent of education and human investments. Yes, there will be a big push to create artificial intelligence algorithms that are capable of teaching. So many people think that that is how you can make good education. So the more we have all these digital competences shared by the teaching communities, the more the teaching community will be able to defend education against inappropriate uses. I think artificial intelligence is great, and it can do really well, but it has to be used by people who are knowledgeable about education. So that's a very important issue to raise, I think. That's going to be a future digital competence we have to add into TETSAT. Is going to be the ability to defend education against the worst excesses of artificial intelligence. How about that? I don't know where that is on me, but we'll have to adjust as things develop. Monica says, I use Google Classroom to share materials and give homework. I only let my students use their mobiles with self-assessment tools like Kahoot or quizzes. Yeah, that's a great way to do it. And they really get engaged in that, I imagine, Monica, and they enjoy doing that. And Anna Rita says, we should also remember that these are only tools, not the content. Absolutely. They're the tools by which we give students a different kind of access to knowledge. Because if you compare the way in which you have access to knowledge through listening to a lecture, where you have no power at all in that process, you can only listen and follow the story, which is good, but it's only one way of doing it. Compare that with reading a book, where you do have some control. You have control over the order in which you read it, the pace at which you read it. And then compare that with something like a simulation of a mathematical equation or a simulation of a system, a social system or a climate system or chemical system or something. And with a simulation, you can play with it and explore it. And then that's different again from a modeling tool, where it's up to you to create that model. And you put data in, you explore data, and you see ways in which you can define how that system operates for yourself and explore it. Now, all of those are very different ways in which we engage with knowledge through different kinds of technology. The technology of just listening in space to a lecture, the technology of reading, the technology of simulating, and the technology of modeling. So the ways in which we use these systems are absolutely crucial. The tools that we use change the way we engage with the content and understand it. Carla's saying, I fully agree with Anna Rita, didactics comes first, ICT second. Yeah.
Diana, we
Carl?
suggest to slowly come to an end.
Yeah? Oh goodness, yes, it's on 5 o'clock. I'm so sorry. Yes, I was wittering on there and I hadn't realised what the time was.
Okay, well,
Just
yeah.
last few points. ICT is in many ways multiply the efficiency of what you do. These are all great points. I hope we can record this chat because there are some very good points that have been made and missed.
Yeah, it's being recorded and it will be shared also in the relevant section of the course afterwards. I have not much to say. It has been really interesting. There's been many questions and comments on the chat. So Monica says at the end that thank you very much for the useful and interesting information. It's been really enjoyable sharing ideas and opinions. So even if we have to go, just to let you know that you can still use the Facebook group, also Twitter with the hashtag MENTEP course, and you also have the forums in the course, so feel free to go there and ask any questions, and we'll be there to answer, Diana, hopefully, right?
Absolutely.
Just to say, in Module 3, so next week you will have an opportunity to ask questions again to Diana, and she will this time reply in written to your questions. So if you feel you haven't asked your most important question or are just inspired now to ask one, you can do that next week in our MOOC.
You can still do it. Great. So just a quick word to say thank you very much, Diana, again, for being here with us. It has been really a pleasure.
Wonderful questions and comments in the chat. It's been great. I wish more people would speak, but I know it's difficult. But thank you very much. Fantastic.
Thank you very much, Diana, and thank you everybody for joining today. We will share the recording in the relevant section of the course, and I think that's it. Keep up the good work, and hope to see you soon. Bye-bye, everybody. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Bye. Thanks, Diana. Bye.